show up for my family. I breathe deep, I move. I check my blood pressure to reduce my risk. I hope my kids think I'm supermom. But if 1 in 5 women will have a stroke, my real superpower is prevention. I rise for tomorrow by defeating stroke today.
Sometimes stress feels like the only constant, and I know that stress may lead to heart disease and stroke. So today I decided to put my phone down and simply breathe. I'm focusing on what I can control, like turning little moments into me time to help my mind, heart, and body. I'm reclaiming my time. Deep breaths for just 1 minute, a walk with my dog, or calling a friend. This is my time and my health, and moment by moment, I'm owning it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. High blood pressure silently affects millions of Americans. Staying on top of your blood pressure is as simple as these 4 easy steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit manageyourbp.org to learn more.
Good afternoon. Since we are here to talk about mental health today, we at the American Heart Association and our panelists did not want to start our program without reflecting on recent violence. We at the American Heart Association are devastated that it has happened again, this time in Texas. An act of senseless violence has taken the lives of at least 19 elementary school children and 2 adults, including a teacher, only a few days before the end of their school year. This comes as families right here in New York State are still burying loved ones after a mass shooting in Buffalo. At the American Heart Association, we denounce violence in all its forms. We denounce crimes of hate and racism and categorically condemn these attacks on our neighbors. These are preeminent threats to our mission, a mission built on every person having the opportunity to live a full, healthy life. We know it's weighing on all of our mental health today. Now, I would like to introduce our MC today, Dr. Disha Mukherjee.
Thank you, Christy. And my heart is just hurting for what has happened. And I'm sending tremendous love, light, and healing vibrations to every single parent, teacher, anyone who has felt this in Texas, in Buffalo, all over our country, all over our world. And so today's topic is extremely important. I can't emphasize the importance of it enough. And so I'm glad that all of us are here together to really discuss this. So thank you for being here today for this very important Check It community conversation, mental health and well-being, sponsored by the Kidney Drugs Foundation. And yes, my name is Dr. Disha Mukherjee. I'm a cardiologist at Saratoga Hospital Medical Group, and I also am the founder of the Path to Meditation Mastery. And we talk a lot about whole heart healing and heart-centeredness because it's a part of our heart health. Today is the last session in the American Heart Association's 2022 Check It Community Conversation Series as we wrap up for the 4-month-long Check It Challenge. Nominations are now open for the 2022 Live Fierce Awards. The American Heart Association is addressing the continuing threat of heart disease by calling on everyone in Live Fierce. When we live fierce, we are resilient, relentless, and unstoppable in creating meaningful change and equitable health impact in our community. The Live Fierce Awards recognize the meaningful impact of an individual, physician, or organization in New York State for championing blood pressure. Submit your nominations by June 30th. The nomination form and all of the resources from the challenge may be accessed at www.heart.org/checkitny. That's New York, not spelled out, it's New York, NY. The Check It Challenge and these conversations have been made possible by the generous support of the sponsors that you see on your screen right now, helping the American Heart Association in its mission to be a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives and controlling blood pressure here in New York State. We have CEFCU, UHS, Fujifilm, today's session sponsor, Kinney Drugs Foundation, PCSB Bank, Ellis Medicine, Baxter, Tompkins, and Northwell Health, Phelps Hospital. Thank you to all of the sponsors. As always, these are interactive sessions. Feel free to use that chat box and make sure you are selecting everyone and not just sending messages to the panelists. Go ahead and put your name and where you are joining from in the chat. Let's see if I can see the chat. Here we go. Excellent, wonderful. Hello, Hannah from Buffalo, Amy Grover, fantastic. I'm from Syracuse as well. Corinne, Ellen, Cynthia, lots of Syracuse, Poughkeepsie. Here we go. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's great. Let's keep the chats coming in. We encourage your participation throughout the event. We are going to hold questions for a Q&A with the panelists at the end. American Heart Association staff will be monitoring the chat box. Thank you. And we will get through as many questions as we can. A reminder, this is a public event and will be recorded. Please avoid disclosing any personal medical information. All right, the recording from today's session will be available on demand on the Check It Challenge website, Facebook event page, and the American Heart Association's Eastern States YouTube channel a few days post-event. You can access the recording and all of the monthly content on the event website, www.heart.org/checkitny. If you are using social media through this conversation, please use the handles you see on the screen at AHA New York and hashtag #CheckIt. So every May, we recognize American Stroke Month and National High Blood Pressure Education Month. Let's use that chat box. Does anyone know the acronym we use for spotting the signs of a stroke? Let's see. There we go. Yes, FAST. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulties, time to call 911, FAST. Time is brain, and in cardiology, we say time is muscle. And it is so important to raise awareness that high blood pressure is the leading cause of stroke. In the month of May, we also recognize Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's so incredibly poignant for us today, especially. So you may be asking yourself, I signed up for a blood pressure challenge. Why are we talking about mental health? Well, I think all of our blood pressure today is a little bit elevated. It's called the mind-heart-body connection. Depression, even in periods of grief, but depression is reported in over 18% of Americans age 18 and older. When we experience depression, anxiety, stress, our heart rate and blood pressure rise. We go into fight or flight. There's reduced blood flow to the heart, and our bodies produce higher levels of cortisol, a stress hormone. I know we're all feeling it. Over time, these effects can lead to heart disease when we're running for our lives. When we're in the middle of the forest with the tiger chasing us, and who knows? Our cortisol, it's a survival instinct, and it's good to have it when we need to run. But having it going on and on for decades and decades leads to heart disease, leads to cardiovascular disease. Depression and anxiety can also develop after cardiac events, after any major health event, including heart failure, heart attack, and stroke, with rates as high as 20 to 30% among survivors. In my practice, in my experience, it's actually much higher than that. So research is starting to show these connections between our mental health and our heart health. Our heart has its own nervous system. It talks to the brain talks to the heart. It's so incredibly important to pay attention to this. And now is especially a good time to talk about it. So our first speaker today is Stephanie Marquesano, founder and president of the Harris Project. After Stephanie's 19-year-old son died by accidental overdose in 2013, she founded the Harris Project to advance prevention programming, implementation of evidence-based integrated treatment, and system transformation to improve the lives of teens and young adults with co-occurring disorders. The Harris Project has become a leading voice in promoting and understanding of co-occurring disorders. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today. Can you start out by telling us about your son, Harris?
Of course. Well, first, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for acknowledging the tragedy of yesterday. I know that collectively we're all grieving, and because so much of my work focuses on teens and young adults, this is particularly, challenging for me. So when I think of Harris, I think of, a creative, loving, kind, humorous kid, really athletic, twinkle in his eye and a smile that would light up the room. But on the flip side, he was a young person who began struggling with an anxiety disorder when he was just 3 years old. And later he got a diagnosis of ADHD when he was in 8th grade. The first substance that he self-medicated with was marijuana, and later with prescription medication. But at no point throughout his treatment had anybody said that a kid like him might turn to substances to self-medicate. What an incredible challenge that would be, that once we entered the more substance use traditional rehabilitation programming, that the mental health needs would never really get met. And so the first time we as a family ever heard of co-occurring disorders, it was described to us as something that was treatable. The program he was going to address it, but we learned very quickly that they would lead with the substances and never get to the mental health piece. So he was committed to his wellness. We were there to support him, but ultimately the recurrence and use would always happen. And so when he died, it was really evident to me as an attorney, as a former PTA president and school board member, that in the prevention space, in the treatment space, and then how we address these two siloed systems, we were doing something incredibly wrong that really wasn't going to change the game.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk some more about COD, or co-occurring disorders. This is the first time I'm even hearing of this. So can you explain for the audience what that means?
So first, I just want to back up for a quick second and say, you have to imagine that in a non-COVID world, there are 1,000 young people sitting in an assembly learning about co-occurring disorders, a 45-minute heavy PowerPoint with facts and information. But co-occurring disorders impacts their generation so profoundly. And just like you, I will say, how many of you have ever heard of co-occurring disorders? And if I get 1 or 2 trepidatious hands, it's a lot, unless they've heard me. If they've heard me before, it's like a groundswell, of course we know what it is. And so facts that I think are important for the audience: between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 of our young people will struggle with a mental health disorder in a given year with severe impact. ADHD, anxiety disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, oppositional defiance disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. Average ages of onset, 50% of mental health disorders arise by 14, 75% by the age of 24. What goes on between 14 and 24? A lot of young people think that experimentation with substances is a rite of passage. Families don't understand the link between mental health and substance use. So what is, how do you get co-occurring disorders? I think, that's the next thing. People, what does that mean? So obviously you're at a much higher risk of developing co-occurring disorders if you have an existing or an emerging mental health disorder, because the likelihood that you might self-medicate and that addiction could occur is much greater. But then you kind of have the middle category, people with a predisposition to a mental health disorder and a substance use disorder, truly like the scales, which came first. And now again, I want to bring the audience back to 1,000 kids sitting in an assembly, learning about Harris, hearing the story, learning about co-occurring disorders and thinking, well, at least I'm not part of that 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 with a mental health disorder. I'll help my friend, but I'm good. No, you see, because your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, and we hear that all the time. We hear it, but we don't think about what that really means. It means that there are chemicals in there swirling around, doing things, changing and developing. And every time you introduce marijuana, vaping, nicotine, alcohol, even legally prescribed medications, you can change that brain chemistry and develop a mental health disorder, even if you weren't on track to. Like one of the spaces we do a lot of work is with student athletes. Student athlete gets injured, legally prescribed opioids. Do they know they can become addicted or dependent in 5 days or less? Do they know that there might be depression that comes along with the break in routine? They're not practicing, they're not hanging out with their friends. Maybe it was career ending. So it's really important to build community safety nets, create that awareness and understanding. Trauma has an impact. We talk about trauma in the heart, trauma and mental health, family history. If you have a family member who struggles with their mental health or substance misuse, the likelihood that you may follow that same path is great unless you have the education. Knowledge is power. The more that we can talk about this, the more we change the trajectory.
Absolutely. So we often have a lot of employee wellness leaders as well as parents in these conversations. So what are some signs for people to look for, whether at home or in the workplace, that someone may be struggling with COD? And what is an appropriate way to help?
So I think backing up, I think that when it comes to mental health in general, we tend to act in crisis. Like, in physical health, you go for your annual checkup, but we don't do a lot of mental health check-ins. We kind of like, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, they're still doing their activities. Everything is fine. And then all of a sudden the crisis happens and everybody reacts. And then you're scrambling for like a name scribbled on a piece of paper, but you're not being proactive. So I think the first thing that family members can do are just like typical mental health check-in, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Or if as a parent or a guardian, like your spidey senses are tingling and you're thinking there's something going on, how are you going to wade into those waters? Always better to say, I've noticed that, I'm concerned when I see you, as opposed to coming across judgmental. I statements are really, really powerful. And then the other important thing is knowing what you're going to do. Like, I'm very cognizant of the kinds of programming that comes into schools. One of them is about like, hidden in plain sight. So it's like places that young people can have drugs hidden in their room. So now a parent goes in, they search and they find, well, reacting, flipping out, not really effective. So I always say, before you start the conversation, you should assume that this is going to be the moment that you're going to get the breakthrough. You're going to find out what's going on. Have you already gathered your resources? Have you already vetted the potential opportunities that you have? Mental health, we've got really, it's hard to find, it's hard to navigate, but being a consumer, it's important to know what you're talking about, what kind of mental health disorders the professional actually treats. You don't want to take a young person with an anxiety disorder to somebody who deals with geriatrics or, marital relationships. So it's really important to know what you're getting into. And then when it comes to co-occurring disorders specifically, it is really challenging to find integrated care. And that's kind of where the systems transformation work that I'm doing in Westchester County is starting to spread across the Mid-Hudson region and across the state. I've presented in the Capital region, like we've been around, but traditionally things have been sort of sequential. Like, you go take care of your substance use, and then when you're good for a couple of months, then you can come and take care of your mental health. Not evidence-based. Then there are some very well-meaning people who say, simultaneous treatment. I'll treat your substance use, go there to treat your mental health. But now you're hearing two different paradigms, you're learning different things, and young people or adults even who are complicated now have to go to multiple appointments. So the best thing you can do is to try to find somebody who addresses both. Integrated treatment is really the gold standard.
Awesome. So this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So will you share with us something you do to help manage your mental health and well-being? I mean, clearly you went through such a tragic thing that so many parents are going through. So how do you manage it?
So interesting, I'm going to pivot because I know we had this conversation before, but I'm going to pivot to what really and truly is my happy space. So early intervention, treatment, and systems transformation are weighty and heavy. I have been a disruptor since I started, and it's a lot, right? You know, you're not going to change things overnight. Prevention. Our co-occurring disorders prevention programming allows me to be with high school and college students all the time. I have externs and interns and their positive energy and them, you know, one school just did a thing on reflections, a picture of your younger self and what you would now say to them. And one young student, a student athlete who just got an award from Senator Harkin for his work with us, said he told his younger self how empowering it is to be able to educate his peers on co-occurring disorders because of the impact that will have in other people's lives. So for me, I think that my calm and my happy space and my place for self-reflection and relaxation is with young people who I believe are going to change the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. If you have questions for Stephanie, make sure you put them in the chat box for our Q&A sessions as we move to our next guest.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving to Dr. Shannon Miller. Shannon is the Director of Outpatient Outcomes and Pharmacy Technology Optimization for Kinney Drugs. Shannon is a clinical pharmacist and diabetes educator who is passionate about making a significant difference in people's lives through innovative, well thought out, and customer-centric services. Shannon, welcome back to the Check It Community Conversations.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. So glad to have you. After hearing from Stephanie just now, throughout the pandemic, we've all seen or experienced the negative impacts on our mental health, including the increase in opioid misuse. What is the role of pharmacists in this opioid crisis?
You know, it's really interesting because pharmacists are usually the first line of defense. You know, we engage in a lot of activities that prevent and our treatment efforts of opioid use disorders and overdose, but a lot of that's not really visible to our patients or our customers. You know, our focus is to prevent opioids from getting in the wrong hands while still maintaining access to needed opioid medications for patients with legitimate prescriptions, right? So it's a fine balance that, you know, we kind of play there to make sure that patients are getting what they need. But two things that pharmacies have really become involved in the last couple of years for prevention is lowering diversion. And one way that we do that is that we're installing drug disposal kiosks in all of our pharmacies in New York. That allows people to clean out their medicine cabinets, right, and dispose of medications that they're no longer needing or use. And bring it to a place where it's going to be disposed of properly, right? Safely and in an environmentally sound way. It's important not to flush things down the toilet. And another thing we do is offer Narcan prescriptions that help treat overdoses. So you don't need a prescription. You can walk into any pharmacy and ask for Narcan, and we can provide you with that. And that's really important. Yeah, wow. It's really important. We do encourage all of our parents of, you know, teenagers, even if your kid's not, you know, potentially involved in anything like that. It's like an EpiPen. Have it on hand just in case, because you never know.
Wow. So you were part of our panel in February and had talked then about controlling blood pressure and provided some important messages about working with your care team to monitor and manage medications. So like blood pressure medication, why is it important for individuals using mental health medications to maintain their regular care schedule with the medical team as part of their overall health?
Yeah, medications and therapy together certainly play a very key role, right, in managing mental health. But we often see patients who are taking these medications actually have lower adherence to their medications compared to patients taking, say, blood pressure medications. And there's a couple things that lead to that. Some of these medications do have side effects, like any other medication, but there's also a stigma of taking medication, for a mental health condition. And some people feel that it just doesn't work, right? Because it does take some trial and error to find the right medication for the right person for their mental health condition. But, whatever the reason, having an integrated, treatment approach to encourage healthy management of medications is important. Patients should be educated about their medication, why they're on it, what to expect from it. They may have expectations that are higher than what the medication can deliver, at least first, if you're titrating up in doses, right? So they may feel that it's not working, but it's just that we need to start low, go slow, right? To avoid maybe some of those potential side effects. We should also encourage patients to talk to their mental health care providers, to give them resources to talk to peer groups, right? Peer support groups are huge. Hearing what other peers have gone through is really more meaningful than conversations that I necessarily have with patients, right? Their experiences are relatable.
Right. So can some mental health medications raise your blood pressure?
They can. There are certain medications that treat depression, like Cymbalta or Wellbutrin, medications that treat ADHD, like Vyvanse and Adderall, have been shown to increase blood pressure. But usually it's only by a few points, and especially at higher doses. So it's really about communication. Let your primary care provider know if you've added any medications like that. They can monitor your blood pressure. They can up the dose on your, blood pressure medication if needed. But on the flip side, while you're with the mental health provider, make sure they know what other medications you're on, right? And they can take that into consideration before they start you on a medication. But always, if you have high blood pressure, monitoring your blood pressure, having an open dialogue with all of your healthcare providers and pharmacists are important.
Yeah. So how can employers and other organizations help to destigmatize mental health and medication therapy?
You really just have to talk openly about it, right? It can't be hush hush. It has to be something that the environment is supportive of sharing experiences. Employers should have, programs that educate their employees on mental health. And it's really about encouraging equality between physical and mental illness, right? A lot of people think that they're two totally different things, and, they're very similar. It's just what body part is, affected. They
all
always
connected.
It is all connected.
All connected.
And it's important that upper management model good mental health practices. Encourage taking PTO, right? Encourage, employees to, connect with each other in different ways that aren't just about, the project or what you're working on, right? Let it get a little personal. And discuss mental health benefits. What is the employer offering so that they know? And be conscious of language. Never use or don't encourage terms like crazy or, things like that.
Right. It's a culture shift actually in the workplace to be talking about it.
It really is.
So same question to you that I asked before. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. So what is something you do to manage your own mental health and well-being?
One thing that's really important to me is disconnecting. We live on our phones a lot. I have a very stressful job. And so when I come home, I put the phone away and, really just am with my family. I think it's very important to be in the moment, right? And electronics and things like that can really distract us from living in the moment. And we also have a motto: you go on vacation, you should always have the next one planned. Always be thinking ahead.
I love that. I love that. So thank you so much, Dr. Miller. So audience, go ahead and keep putting your questions in the chat for our Q&A coming up as we move to our last panelist, Joelle Monaco. So Joelle is the Director of Outreach and Business Engagement for the Mental Health Association in New York State, where she oversees a workforce development and outreach program, a statewide initiative designed to improve employment opportunities for individuals living with mental health challenges. Joelle has extensive experience in training enhancements centered around community and workplace well-being, along with organizational enhancements. Joelle, great to have you today.
Great to be here. Thank you. And thank you to all the participants online with us.
Awesome. So one of the courses you teach, I'm so interested, is called Mental Health First Aid. What exactly is that? And who can use it?
Yeah, so Mental Health First Aid is, in my perspective, a really great training. I've been teaching it now for over 6 years, and it's an evidence-based, peer-reviewed mental health certification. Currently, the organization I work for, Mahaney's, and its affiliates offer this training across New York State. And more recently, there's been a virtual offering. So we're reaching far beyond New York State with the Mahaney's and its affiliates. And really, this training teaches the basic understanding of mental health and substance use, along with providing practical application to support individuals. Just like your standard CPR trains you to assist an individual having a heart attack, Mental Health First Aid helps you to assist someone experiencing a mental health or a substance use related crisis or challenge. And this course is built in the principle that you recognize risk factors and warning signs, but you also understand strategies and techniques to start a conversation. To Stephanie's point, she made reference that you might be thinking certain things, or you might be noticing certain, signs or symptoms, but you don't know how to start that conversation. You don't know where to point someone to the direction of care. And this certification really provides a great 5-step action plan that we refer to as ALGE that helps empower individuals to reach out and connect with someone when they notice those signs and symptoms, as opposed to feeling intimidated and maybe not saying anything at all. And you asked, who's this training acceptable for? Anyone. We train community members, professionals, schools, workplaces, and the list goes on. So really anyone who's interested in helping their community and making mental health a priority, this course is for them.
Oh my goodness, this is, I'm like, holy cow, they require us to have CPR training for the hospital. We need this.
I'll connect with you.
Us doctors need this, yes. So what is one actionable item someone could take back to their workplace, or even informational organizational settings, to create a healthier culture for mental health and well-being?
Yeah, I'm going to start from the organizational perspective. I think it's really important to highlight that mental health exists in every workplace. Depression is actually the leading cause for lost productivity across the world. So at the lowest level, creating a space where mental health and well-being are a consistent topic, right? Shannon pointed this out. Start by talking to your people. Ask what they need. What would they like to see, and go from there? Because a lot of times we find there's a significant gap between what organizations think they're doing to support and contribute to the mental health and wellness of their team versus the reality of what individuals are experiencing at all levels of the organization, right? Because we have executive level down to maybe hourly individuals, and needs are entirely different based on individuals, locations, and also times of the year. And we've, recognize it today. Certain situations can stimulate certain emotions. So we have to be ready and attuned and also flexible to be able to meet our people where they are. Knowing that organizations can also look to mental health resources, services, and accommodations, because I always point this out, mental health is included in the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's really important for organizations to train their leaders so that they're confident but they're also empowered to support their teams. And then I'll jump to from the individual side, because I do want to point this out. I know we may have some listeners on here that may be in the workplace and maybe their organization isn't on the leading edge, right? Or I like to say they're getting ready to initiate some of these programs. That doesn't mean you can't create mental health priorities in the workplace for yourself. And really, a lot of times it starts with setting healthy boundaries and maintaining those boundaries both personally and professionally. You can educate yourself. What are your organization's benefits? What are the mental health resources available to you? Maybe through your insurance provider, an EAP. Do you have ERG groups? Those are referred to as employee resource groups. These are all things that you can go back and take a look through your employee handbook, which most of us don't reference annually or monthly, but also making sure we're taking breaks. This has been a huge thing. If you're in the office, getting up and taking a lunch break. For those of you that might be working remotely, getting up and moving from your desk daily, just taking that time to schedule that self-care and being intentional. So we're making time for ourselves so that we don't unprioritize or deprioritize it and skip that self-care. So those are just a few things. And I know Shannon covered a few. So, I think you have a good package of what to start with.
Oh my gosh, so important. So this July, there will be a new phone number that people can call, text, or chat to access the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we are pretty excited here at Mahaney's to finally have a national suicide mental health and crisis line. And that is going to be available on July 16th, 2022. So just a few months away. And through this, it's a 3-digit number. It's going to be 988. And as we know, many people are experiencing mental health related distress or crisis situations without the support and care they needed, or they just don't know where to go. And this lifeline will provide 24/7 free and confidential support to individuals in the suicide crisis or even mental health related distress. Individuals themselves can call this lifeline to reach out and connect with a trained professional. But it's also important to highlight that individuals can reach out and dial 988 if they're worried about someone else who may be in need of crisis support. And I know we just dropped a link that you can learn a little bit more about that 988 and the July 2nd launch.
Wow. So like instead of 911,
Yep.
you're calling 988.
Yes. And that is going to have trained professionals that are aware of mental health, suicide, and substance use. And they're able to accurately respond, but also connect people to community-based resources within their state, within their area, so that we can take away as many barriers as possible to people getting the help that's needed.
Wow, that's fantastic. So I'm going to ask you as well, in managing your own mental health and well-being, what is something you do for yourself?
Yeah. So, being in this field, you would think it's natural, right? It's a daily effort. I have to put that out there. It's not something that's natural or innate, or we just do this regularly. It's something I have to do every single day. So really it starts with self-reflection. I start the day really assessing, where am I? And this allows me to be grateful, be self-compassionate when I need to, or also maybe set some stricter boundaries to ensure I'm doing what I need to do to maintain my mental health and well-being. And when I set those boundaries, it's much easier to prioritize my self-care. So a lot like Shannon, we are very similar. I disconnect regularly. That is something that I'm super intentional about. I take my work email off of my phone, but I also create time to go to things that are important to me. And they're on my calendar, just like a meeting would be. So my Monday and Wednesday Pilates class is on my calendar, just like a meeting. So I'm less likely to skip it or say, I'll get to it next week. It's just as important as being here with all of you today. Because if I'm not taking care of myself in that aspect, I can't show up and serve and give the information to the community that's so widely needed.
Oh my gosh, that's so important. I just came back from disconnecting for 7 days in a silence retreat. They were just amazing.
Oh gosh.
So thank you, Joelle,
Thank
Stephanie, and Shannon. I'm going to ask you to turn on your videos and join us on screen for the Q&A portion of the program. So, okay, so here we go. I'd
We
like to
have-
ask. Yep.
We have a few questions that have
Oh,
come
go
in.
for it.
One question, I also have a high stress job. Can someone explain more about the connection between stress and blood pressure? What is actually happening in our body and how can it lead to heart disease or stroke?
I can take that, but if one of you would like to respond, you can. No? Okay, so I'll go for it. As a cardiologist who deals with this every single day, when you have chronic elevations in your blood pressure for days, months, years, decades, the pressure that is put on your heart increases the heart muscle thickness. It makes it stiffer. The shear forces in all of your arteries goes up, and your plaque and your cholesterol and all that crap can get into the vessel lining a lot faster, because it's like the pressure is pushing the crud into those arteries, which can go into your neck, into your brain, into your heart, like all over your body. And so that's why it's so important. We want to make your heart, we want to make your vessels and your heart, we want to make it easy for your organs to function. And so that's why it's so important to keep the blood pressure down, but that's also so important why we need to address our mental health and well-being. So we have to get to the root cause of what's driving that blood pressure up. So that's why this is so, so important, why I feel so strongly about it.
Thank you. Our next question. Can you talk to how isolation, especially during the pandemic, has led to increased mental health issues?
Joelle, you want to take it?
I saw Stephanie on mute first. So Stephanie,
No,
you want to
Joelle,
start?
you go first. I can follow up. No worries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was just gonna say, we know as humans, we thrive on human interaction. And also with that isolation came a lack of identity and routines, which increase the risk factors for individuals and compromise their mental health. When you don't have a routine, well, sometimes we get annoyed, right? Doing those things regularly, that gives us a sense of control. And there was a lack of control. And not only that, but we also lost our identity in what we did daily, the groups we participated with, the individuals we engaged with, which through that led to the isolation and the increase for stress, uncertainty, and also depression, which we've referenced quite a few times here.
And I'm actually going to take the flip side, which is the isolation, I think, for many has been extremely challenging. But what I've found with our teens and young adults, for some of them, that break from the merry-go-round, from that public persona, that fronting every day in their social life, in their school life, that break was actually good for them. And they're having a very hard time coming back. Like their ability to manage their anxiety, their social stressors in the real world again have caused, I think, we had expectations that the doors would open and everybody would be great. And I think those who are continuing or are first struggling are having a very hard time articulating that to people. And so I always say, notice who you can speak to, find a trusted adult, who is your go-to person. And for the adults, particularly in schools where they're still wearing masks, it's really hard to see what's going on. It was bad enough with the screen, but the mask on does not really make it so much easier to see like what's going on behind. And so I really give a lot of credit to the mental health counselors, to the school social workers who are already so overworked, who now have to kind of discern what's really going on for our young people.
And it's okay to feel differently than someone else. Somebody might have found the time out that we got from the pandemic as a reprieve from the, like you said, the merry-go-round, and others felt so disconnected too much. And so it's okay for you to feel different than your friend. And just because somebody else is excited about being out and you're like, oh crap, totally get that. And it's okay to be you and know what you thrive in.
And more important, and tying into that exact theme is, don't compare your mental health needs to somebody else's. Like, I'm not as bad as so-and-so, so I really shouldn't like go and ask for help. Like, I speak to parents frequently. I mean, my child died. Like, it doesn't get much worse than that. And so when people try to like kind of say, well, I know I'm really not walking in your shoes, like, I don't want you to walk in my shoes. I want you to get the help and support for you, for your family, for the things that you need, so that you can live the happiest, best life for you that you're, destined to have. And so I think that that's important too.
Don't should all over yourself.
Of that.
Yeah, don't do it. So, all right. Do we have any more questions? I think we're okay.
We do have more questions.
Oh, good.
What would you recommend for a heart attack or stroke survivor who's feeling depressed or anxious after a medical event? Are mental health medications okay to take during surgical recovery?
Absolutely. Yes, they are. It's important to discuss with your surgeon, with your doctor, what you're feeling, because this is not uncommon. So it's common. I see it all the time. When you have those kinds of big surgeries, it's a life-changing event. So it's ridiculous for us to think that it's not going to impact you. And so it's really important to speak up, talk about it, and figure out maybe it is medicines for you, or maybe it's therapy, maybe it's spirituality, who knows? So it's important to talk about it and let people know.
Are there any indicators we should look out for with our children to know if they're having mental health issues?
I'm happy to grab that one. So again, this is one of those things where you know your child best. And am I frozen? That's really strange. I don't know why. Oh, now I'm unfrozen. You know your child best, and you know when there are changes. And as a former youth mental health first aid instructor, Joelle and I are really right on board with this. It's really the changes that you might see. Like, it's one thing, you want your child to be the superstar baseball player, but they're really not into it and they've picked up the drums, right? That's a typical kind of, developmental thing. But if they've stopped playing baseball and now they're in their room and they're alone and they're isolated, that could be a potential problem. If they want to go to the beach with their friends and they don't want to go to the family barbecue, that's typical development. But when they don't want to do anything, that's when your spidey senses should start tingling. And so it's really about judging what's going on for your child. And the other thing that I think is really important is, we're in a generation of helicopter parents, which get such a bad rap in the world, right? So you get the parents who drive their children hard, they're on top of everything, and then something goes wrong with their child, and everybody's like, it's your fault, you did this. And then on the flip side, you have parents who say, I let them do what they want to do. They're up until 3 o'clock in the morning doing their work. They're always on. Neither of those situations are ideal, but a lot of it is how your child is wired. And so it's really important to be very mindful of how to support their resilience, how to give them space to have their voices. Like I always say, listen 90% of the time, talk 10% of the time. Prompt, give space, like allow silence to happen. They're thinking about how they want to respond to you. And so giving room and recognizing when things don't seem okay. And when they don't seem okay, don't be afraid to ask your pediatrician, to ask school-based professionals who they might turn to, where you could get professional advice.
Starting in July, 988.
Yes.
Cool.
I have another question for you all. This I'm thinking is probably going to go to Shannon. Are there specific drugs that are a concern to keep in the medicine cabinet? How do I know when they need to be disposed of?
Well, really, we recommend to not keep, if you have a prescription medication, don't save it for a rainy day. Doesn't really matter what it is. There are things that impact the efficacy of the drug. It breaks down under not good storage position, and if you leave it in the bathroom, you take showers, it gets humid, it starts to break down the tablets, and it's just not worth saving that penicillin or amoxicillin. But what we really do get concerned about from a diversion perspective are the controlled substances, right? The hydrocodones that you might get after getting, your wisdom teeth out, or whatever that happens to be, where you might only need one tablet. You really shouldn't be keeping those just in case, right? That's what we want you to bring in and dispose of in our kiosks.
And our last question today, which also goes back to you, Shannon, do we need prescription or training for Narcan?
So you don't need a prescription from your doctor. We actually have something called a standing order where we fill it as a prescription, we bill it to your insurance. Most insurances are covering it. And then we'll process it similar to that. But our pharmacists do give you a training on the product that we provide. And there are different options for Narcan. We do tend to stick with the easiest option, which is the nasal spray. It's the easiest to use instead of like a syringe or anything like that.
I didn't even know there was that formulation. That's awesome. Excellent. So great. So I'd like to ask each of the speakers to leave us with a call to action, closing thought, or a biggest takeaway from today's conversation. Who's going to go first? Just unmute yourself.
I would say from my perspective, it's springtime, clean out your medicine cabinets, drop it off at Kinney in our kiosk, but also just find what makes you happy. Make sure that you do something every day that you can just be happy and smile about, whatever that is, and never feel ashamed of what that is, even if it's taking 10 minutes to yourself in the bathroom while your kids are doing something else or whatever it happens to be. Just make yourself happy every day.
Yep, it's your birthright.
Jump in. We've started the conversation. It sounds like there's a lot of questions around mental health and well-being. So, you've been on here. I would say sign up for another class, sign up for another learning, do some background research and find out about how mental health and well-being and all of these things we talked about can impact your work, your life, your family. And I always go back to your community, because at the end of the day, if you're taking care of yourself, you're impacting your community. And we can do a lot more when we're all working together, taking care of ourselves.
Love it. Absolutely.
And I think for me, it's the importance of, we focus on mental health matters, but in my world, it's the why it matters. And particularly for our teens, our young adults, and even as our adults, it matters because when we don't take care of it, that's when we navigate to things like substance misuse, unhealthy relationships with food, non-suicidal self-injuries. So the more proactive we can be, the more we share what we've learned today, the better it is to support the people around us and to get help if we need it ourselves and to not be afraid of that.
Exactly. We can't give from an empty well. So you have to love yourself first. And then from there, you give that love. Excellent. So thank you to all of our speakers and to the sponsors that you see on the screen for making the 2022 Check It Challenge possible. Again, thank you to today's presenting sponsor, Kinney Drugs Foundation. And last but not least, thank you to all of you in the audience joining us today and for your participation. What a great set of questions. So with our focus on brain health, we would be remiss if we did not invite all of you attendees today to join us for a special session with the Rochester and Finger Lakes chapter of the Alzheimer's Association on Wednesday, June 8th. Healthy living for your brain and body. Tips from the latest research. It's going to be a great conversation you don't want to miss. A member of the AHA staff is going to put the registration link in the chat box. And we hope that you have enjoyed the 2022 Check It Challenge and the Community Conversation Series. The recorded sessions and blood pressure resources will remain available on the Check It Challenge event website, www.heart.org/checkitny. When the webinar closes today, you will be directed to a Check It Challenge participation survey. Your feedback is appreciated and helps to shape the future of the program. So continue checking your blood pressure, keep striving to make healthier choices for your mind and body. It's not just about the leafy greens, it is, but it's also important to stand guard at the gates of your own mind and really pay attention to what you're allowing in to your brain as well. So call your doctor, schedule that checkup, and thank you to everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.